Welcome back! In today's analysis, we're tackling something that is universally embarrassing, deeply misunderstood, and honestly, just incredibly fascinating from a psychological standpoint. We're talking about why our brains decide to hit the laugh button at literally the absolute worst possible moments. Okay, let's dive into this right away. I actually want to challenge you to a quick observation test. Let's see how sharp those instincts are.
So, here's a little scenario for you. Imagine a family, a mom, a dad, and their 3 sons. One day, the dad gives the mom some cash, and she safely tucks it away under the bed. But a little while later, she checks on it, and some of the money is missing. Furious, she lines up her 3 sons. She interrogates the youngest first. "Did you take it?" He looks dead serious and says, "No." She asks the middle son. He also looks completely serious and denies it. But the moment she looks at the oldest son, before he even gets the words out, he suddenly smiles, lets out a little laugh, and says, "I didn't take it either." So, I'll give you just a second to think about it. Based on human behavior, who took the money? A, B, or C?
Well, if you guessed A, the oldest son who laughed, you just made the exact same mistake the mother did. Here's the plot twist. The oldest son in this story was actually the narrator of our source material, and he was completely innocent. He didn't steal a single dime. The core problem was that in that super tense moment, an involuntary laugh just sort of escaped him. It made him look incredibly guilty, it resulted in a ton of unearned suspicion, and it sparked endless mocking from his friends. And the most frustrating part of the whole shebang? The harder he tried to suppress that smile, the more intensely the laughter bubbled up.
So the crucial point here is that this involuntary reaction is actually a solvable puzzle. Here is our scientific roadmap for today. We'll cover the laughter myth, brain signals, the psychological trap, Technique 1, emotion labeling, Technique 2, shifting focus, and finally, Technique 3, self-distancing.
First up, the laughter myth. It's a neurologic response, not a character flaw. Before we even try to fix the issue, we have to bust a massive myth. Laughing during a serious, tense, or even tragic moment does not mean you're an insensitive person. It really doesn't mean you don't care about the gravity of the situation. This is so absolutely crucial to understand. The problem is not your personality. The problem is simply a glitch in your brain's emotional regulation system.
Now, what's really fascinating is looking at the exact moment things go wrong. Your brain doesn't just feel emotions, right? Every single second, it's calculating how you should express them. Normally, this is seamless, but in highly charged environments, your brain receives 2 radically conflicting signals at the exact same time. Signal 1 is screaming, "This is serious, react carefully." But signal 2 is over there saying, "I am incredibly nervous and I need to release this pressure immediately." When these 2 signals collide, boom, an immense amount of emotional pressure builds up inside the brain.
And, just like a pressure cooker, your brain has to let that steam out somehow. Every human brain releases this intense emotional pressure differently. Some people completely freeze and go totally silent, some people suddenly burst into tears, and some people, completely involuntarily, begin to laugh. The main takeaway here is that laughter in this specific context is purely a pressure release response. It has absolutely nothing to do with actual joy or finding the situation funny.
But you might be wondering, if we logically know we shouldn't be laughing, why can't we just stop it? Well, it's because you're falling into a classic psychological trap. If I tell you right now, do not think of a pink elephant, what happens? Instantly, your brain conjures up a massive pink elephant. The exact same thing happens with nervous laughter. When you desperately tell yourself, don't laugh, your brain actually stops focusing on the situation and starts hyper-monitoring your laughter. By constantly checking, wait, am I laughing? You actually increase your awareness of the urge, which makes the laughter significantly stronger and way harder to suppress.
Let's move to the next phase and see how this builds our solution. Because the root of this problem lies in the brain's emotional regulation system, it means we can scientifically control it. We aren't powerless here. To regain control, we're going to look at 3 concrete steps: emotion labeling, shifting physical focus, and self-distancing.
Technique 1, emotion labeling. When a serious situation hits and you feel that awkward laugh coming on, you have to realize that your brain is just using laughter as a lazy shortcut. It's overwhelmed, it doesn't know how to process the complexity of the moment, so it just defaults to a nervous chuckle to cope.
The real secret here is to identify what you are actually feeling. Laughter is just a mask. The hidden emotion is usually nervousness, awkwardness, sheer embarrassment, or just overwhelming pressure. So here's your practical instruction. The very next time you feel an inappropriate laugh bubbling up, force yourself to pause for exactly 2 seconds. Ask yourself internally, what am I actually feeling right now out of this list?
The moment you successfully name that hidden emotion, saying to yourself, okay, I am feeling extremely awkward right now, a psychological shift occurs. You literally force your brain out of its panicked automatic reaction mode and pull it directly into awareness mode. By clearly understanding the root cause, you aren't fighting the laughter directly anymore. You're addressing its source. And the rule of psychology states that once you clearly name an emotion, its intensity instantly drops, which directly lowers that urge to laugh.
But what happens if you label the emotion and that nervous giggle is still stubbornly sticking around? That brings us to technique 2, shift physical focus. Remember the pink elephant trap? If you sit there pouring all your mental energy into the thought, do not laugh, you're really just feeding the emotional fire.
Instead of fighting the laugh, you need to give your brain a new, immediate job to do in the present moment. You can use grounding tactics. Try feeling your feet planted firmly on the floor, noticing the pressure inside your shoes. You can lightly press your fingers together and focus entirely on that physical sensation. Or you can silently count your breathing rhythm. And this brilliantly illustrates how our brains work. By forcing your attention onto these minor physical tasks, you're literally stealing the brain's monitoring resources away from the emotional loop. It simply doesn't have the bandwidth to maintain the laughter anymore.
So, the golden rule for this second technique is beautifully simple. Change direction, don't use force. True emotional control in tense moments is almost never about aggressively fighting a feeling head-on. It's about outsmarting your brain by successfully changing its focus to something completely mundane and physical.
Now let's move to technique 3, self-distancing. We've talked about manipulating your attention, but this technique requires you to entirely change the role you are playing in the situation.
When you're caught in a serious moment and you start to laugh, your brain usually goes into a first-person panic. Your internal monologue screams, "Oh no, I'm laughing. Everyone is looking at me. I have to stop." This self-obsession just amplifies the panic. The psychological antidote to this is self-distancing. You need to shift to the third-person observer view. Instead of being trapped inside your own head, imagine you're a security camera, or maybe just a person standing quietly in the corner of the room watching the scene unfold from the outside.
Why does this work so well? Well, because psychological research shows that stepping into an observer role forcibly yanks your brain out of its immediate hyper-reactive emotional mode. By creating a mental gap between yourself and the situation, you basically cool the entire scenario down because distance equals lower emotional intensity. You are no longer the victim of the awkward moment, you're just a detached spectator.
Practice makes perfect. Stop judging yourself. As we wrap up this explainer, the absolutely most important thing you can do right now is to remember that nervous laughter is just a minor processing error in the brain. It is not a reflection of your empathy or your character. By practicing these 3 techniques, labeling the true emotion, shifting your physical focus, and using self-distancing, you'll drastically improve your emotional control and navigate those tense situations with absolute confidence.
But I want to leave you with a provocative thought, one inspired by a pinned comment from our source material. Today we proved that you can basically hack your brain to control an involuntary response like laughter. So the question becomes, if you can master laughter, can you use these exact same pathways to control your everyday anger just as easily? Imagine never letting a sudden burst of anger ruin your day again. It's an exciting frontier of emotional intelligence for sure, and definitely something to think about until our next analysis. Keep learning and stay focused.